All right. Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. We are learning Maseches Kesubos. We're 2/3 of the way down on Nun Vav Amid Aleph. We'll be learning all of Nun Vav and Nun Zayin Amid Aleph down to that Mishnah. And then tomorrow night, Emir Hashem, we'll be learning the rest of Nun Zayin and Nun Ches. And then Friday morning, we will be learning Shabbos's blot, and then we're caught up until Sunday night, but not including Sunday night. So we're 2/3 of the way down, 10 lines or so, 8 lines into the wide lines on Nun Vav Amud Aleph, and there we're quoting a line from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah had said that in the name of Rabbi Huda, he says, Omer Ratza Kosev Lebesula, that one is able to write a lesser amount for his wife to be, that had she been a Basula, instead of writing 200, he could write 200, and she can say, I already got 100, meaning she can write off part of the potential proceeds, and that's considered mutter. So says the Gemara, an implication from our Mishnah, the Sabar Rabbi Huda the Kosvin Shovar, is Rabbi Huda of the opinion that when there's an existing shtar, he would then also write a receipt. After all, we're concerned about that. Let's say that a person borrowed money and he only pays back part of the chov that he owed. He owed $100, but he only paid back 50. So what do we do in regards to the original shtar? Rabbi Huda says, Rabbi Huda Omer Yachlif, you have to tear up the original shtar and rewrite a new shtar. We don't give one new receipt to the person who gave money, because what we're afraid of is that the person who was holding the original shtar, it still says he lent out 100, even though the guy paid back 50. So we don't want to have any documents that are inaccurate, because it can cause for incorrect collections. So Rabbi Huda is of the opinion of Yachlif. We don't write a shover, we don't write receipts, we rewrite the shtar altogether. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yichtov lo shover. Rabbi Yossi argues that you can write a shover, a receipt. So therefore, we have a question that our Mishnah implies that there is Kosvin Shover, that you can write a Shover in the name of Rabbi Huda, but the new Mishnah that we just brought right here, and this is a Mishnah from Maseches Baba Basra, this Mishnah indicates that Rabbi Huda is not of the opinion, but Rabbi Huda is of the opinion that you're not allowed to write a Shover. So how do we answer this question? 2 answers. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Kishe Shovarta Mitocha. Rabbi Yirmiyah says that the way we solve this contradiction in Rabbi Huda is that maybe the shovar is written within the receipt. So let's say you have one within the shtar. So you have one piece of paper, and it says, my name is Chaim, and I lent Shmuel $100. Okay, and then I paid back 50. So then we scratch it out on the document and say paid $50. Only $50 remaining. So let's just write it on the same shtar. And then the concern that Rabbi Yehuda has in the Mishnah from Baba Basra is no longer a concern, because all of the information lives within one shtar. So that's one possibility. Abaye doesn't accept this answer. Abaye Omar, no, it's not really black and white in regards to whether or not Rabbi Huda categorically rejects writing a shover. Let's see what happens. We could even have a case scenario in our Mishnah in regards to a ksuba, where he is not going to write the shovar within the shtar. It's going to be a separate document. Now, Bishlam Mahasam, over there in the case from Baba Basra, Vadai Pare, over there, we know that there was some payment that was definitely made, and our concern over there was Dilma Mirkas Tvarta. Maybe he'll lose the shovar, he'll lose the receipt, umapik le'lishtara, and then the shtar will be found, the original shtar that says he still owes 100, v'hadar gavi zimna achrina, and then there will be another opportunity for the person to collect, and that would be forbidden because he's double dipping with a shtar. But hacha, in regards to the ksuba, vada yohav la milsa, was anything actually ever given to her? Nothing was given to her yet. They're still married. All she said is, I know in theory you'll owe me 200 down the road. What I'm telling you is I'm okay with 100. And natre, if he keeps the shtar, great. And lo natre, ihu dafsin anafshe. He's the guy who hold on to your shtar. Hold on to your shtar. So therefore, Abaye does allow, under certain circumstances, to have a shovar, and under other circumstances, he does not. So says the Gemara, Taima, it seems to be that the reason why our Mishnah functions the way that it does is because the kasvale. The reason why Rabbi Huda in our Mishnah says that if the wife agrees to have a lesser payment, she can write off part of it. The reason why that works is because the kasvale. Aval, what's the inference? Al peh lo. Had she said simply verbally, I hereby forego 100 of my 200 zuz, it's implied that that doesn't work. So let's analyze whether or not a verbal commitment, her verbal write-off of part of her ksuba, whether or not that actually counts. Says the Gemara, Amai, why would we assume that al-peh does not work? After all, it's davar sheben mamonhu. And we've learned already, V'shamina le Rabbi Yehuda da Amar davar sheben mamon tano kayam. That when it comes to davar sheben mamon, when it comes to things that are related to monetary matters, the verbal commitment, the verbal writing off of that amount of money does work against the implication of our Gemara. And where do we see this? We see this in a brisa. Titania. First, let's learn Reb Meir's opinion, and then we'll get to our sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Ha'omer li'isha. A man says to a woman, Hareat mikudeshes li, I hereby would like to be married to you. Al menas she'ein lich alai she'er ksus ve'ona. Mamash a pasuk in Chumash. He says we're married, but we're married on the condition that I don't have to fulfill she'er ksus ve'ona. We learned about she'er ksus ve'ona. She'er is food, ksus is clothing, and ona is the halachic obligations for intimacy from a husband to a wife. The halacha is, in this case, harezu mekudeshes. First of all, the kedushin is chal. And second of all, utno batil. You can't take a pasuk in Chumash and violate it and use it as a t'nai in your kedushin. You can't say we're married on the condition that you kill. No, you can't violate halacha like that. It doesn't work. So not only are you mekudash, not only are you married, but you're still chayiv in your ridiculous t'nai that you thought you were getting out of. You're still chayiv in feeding her. You're still chayiv in giving her clothing. You're still chayiv to be available for intimacy. What?
What happens if she makes more than?
It has nothing to do with this. This is just a question of a husband's burdens to his wife. What is his halachic burden?
I'm not trying to get out of it, but
Doesn't change. He still has an obligation to feed her. As long as her salary goes to him, then he has an obligation to feed her. Things would change if, in fact, she literally didn't give her his money. That's a little different. But either way, these things are still halachic obligations. Anyways, that's Rav Meir. What the shita we need is the next part of the brisa. 5 lines from the bottom on Nun Vav Amud Aleph. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion B'davar shebim mamon, of the 3 items in the pasuk of she'er, ksus, ve'ona, the halacha is that which is related to finances, to na'okayim, he's married, and his t'nai is mekuyam, he does not have to give her clothing, and he does not have to feed her. T'nai kayim. Just ona would be the obligation. So what do we see over here? We see that there's that the words count. What did he say? He said a phrase. Harad mekudeshesli al manas, that I don't have to keep these things. And what does Rabbi Yehuda say? It works. Therefore, we see that verbal commitments work. Oh, so that's a great question. So therefore, says the Gemara, Kasavar Rabbi Yehuda ksuba derabanan. The reason why over here by the ksuba, why Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that she, what was going on in this Gemara here? Why the verbal commitment doesn't work, says the Gemara, is because of Kesubos derabanan. And then we have to get into this principle, V'chachamim asu chizuk l'divreihem yoser mishal Torah, that the Chachamim, we had more strict rules by their own din and by dinei derabanan than by dinei deoraisa. Therefore, by ksuba, a woman is not allowed to verbally write off part of her ksuba, because that's derabanan. Ksuba is derabanan. However, when it comes to dinei deoraisa, it does in fact work. Says the Gemara, that's not true, and I'm going to bring you 2 examples as to why that's not true. What's not true? It's not true that the Chachamim are always mechazik themselves, or mechazik divreihem b'dinei derabanan. Here's a great example. Hare peiros derabanan. Peiros, here referencing the nichsei malug. They're going to be the donations, the dowry that a father-in-law would give to his daughter so that it can be a part of the marriage. Those are derabanan. V'lo avdu lahu rabbanan chizuk. And the rabbis were not very strict in regards to peiros, which are derabanan. It's not 2 lines from the bottom. What does that mean that the rabbis were not giving a chizuk to their divreihem, that they were not stronger or more strict by a din derabanan? It's not. The Mishnah writes, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, la'olam hu ochel pere peiros, he's allowed to eat the fruits of the trees that he's given, ad sheyichtov, until he writes the following. He writes to her the following: Dinu dvarim, the halacha should be by me. Ein li b'nichsayich ubeferosein ubeperos perosein adolam. Nothing. I get nothing of yours. The kaimalan. How did we understand that Mishnah? How did we understand that Mishnah? The Gemara says on the top of Nun Vav Amud Beis, the kaimalan, that in this particular context, my kosev. What does it mean that something is written? It means omer, that it was even verbally said. And what do we see? That's a din derabanan, and we see that it didn't work. That he's still going to be fully obligated until he actually says something. So therefore, where we see a breaking of the rule here, because we see that we're not being strict here by the din derabanan of peros. So Amar Abaye lechol yesh ksuba. Everybody has a ksuba v'lo lechol yesh peros. So we have to make our rules make sense. Milsa deshchicha, like a ksuba, something that's very common of the Rabbanon Chizuk. There, where we have a din derabanan, asu chachamim chizuk l'divreihem, and they were strict all the way to the nth degree. And therefore, by ksuba, because it's milsa deshchicha, so by ksuba, therefore asu chizuk l'divreihem, and therefore the verbal reduction in the cost of the ksuba that a woman agrees to is not going to work. But milsa de lo shchicha, albeit midrabanan, but it's an uncommon experience. Lo avdu barabanan chizuk. So therefore, our line still holds true, that we are saying that there's a din derabanan, and when there's a din derabanan, asu chizuk l'divreihem, and therefore by a ksuba, we do not trust a woman's verbal writing off of the volume of her ksuba. The Gemara asks yet another question. Harei chamarim. We have a case of donkey drivers. These are merchants. Tishchiche, they're very common. And velo avdu la rabbanan chizuk. We just basically built a formula. If you have a din derabanan, and it's shchiach, then it should also be asu chizuk l'divreihem. This case of the chamarim is derabanan, it's shchiach, it's commonplace, yet it's not asu chizuk l'divreihem. How so? It's not. 5 lines down, nun vav amud beis. The Mishnah writes, "Hachamarim shenichnesu le'ir." You have a couple of people traveling together as chamarim. Ve'omar echad mehem. We learned this in another Masechta. Where did we learn this? Here. Wow. Chaf Dalet. Okay. Feels like a long time ago. What was that case? These people are traveling together. One person says, Shali chadash, b'shel chaveri yashan. My grains are new. They're still not dried out yet. You shouldn't buy from me. You should buy from your friend. Shali eno mesukan, shel chaveri mesukan. Mine, they haven't been tithed yet. My friends, they have been tithed. So you should shop from him. And really what they were doing, it was just a trick. They kind of built some ne'emunos to say, don't shop by me, shop by him. And then in the next city, they would flip and reverse, and they would basically support each other in regards to their advertising of the other person. What does the Tanakama say? A ne'emanim. They're not trusted. What does Rabbi Huda say? Omer, ne'emanim. We do trust them. So what do we see over here? We're not being strict by a din derabanan, and it's shchiach. So says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, it depends. When there's a vadai dedivrehem, when there's a din derabanan, that's a vadai, which is that we owe this woman money based on the shtar of her ksuba of the rabbanan chizuk. Suffik dedivrehem lo of the rabbanan chizuk. But when there's a suffik of what's going on, we don't know exactly what the motivations are of these donkey drivers, of these merchants. So therefore, in that case, lo of the rabbanan chizuk. In conclusion, we have one more sheet to learn, but this track in the Gemara basically paints the following picture. Why is it that we're strict by a ksuba that her verbal writing off of 100 of her 200 zuz doesn't work? So the Gemara says that when do we apply the rule that the chachamim asu chizuk l'divreihem? That's when it's a din derabanan, when it's shchiach, and when it's a vadai. So that's their formula. Under those 3 circumstances, with those 3 criteria, then asu chizuk l'divreihem. And Rava gives a little bit of a different answer, more of an ukimta type of answer. Rava Amar, no, but d'mai hikilu. This isn't really entering the sugya about asu chizuk l'divreihem, but just we're talking about d'mai, and when it comes to d'mai, we were more mekel, and you cannot ask this question against the ksuba because this question is talking about d'mai. Fine. Now, Rav Meir in our Mishnah, we're a quarter of the way down, almost a third of the way down on Nun Vav Amud Beis, Rav Meir Omer Kol HaPoches. Remember this Gemara that said, our Mishnah, that said in the name of Rav Meir, that any man who tries to give his wife a ksuba of less than 200 zuz, then the Gemara compared it was tantamount to Be'ilas Znus. It's not actually znus, but it has an appearance of znus. Why? Because what's the whole point of a ksuba? The whole point of a ksuba is to protect a woman for her husband flippantly divorcing her. So we put a financial burden on the husband to say, you can't just walk away from this woman. You have to pay. What if she's missing her ksuba? You should not be intimate. That's what the Gemara our Mishnah is speaking about. Says the Gemara, kol hapoches, and seemingly afilu b'tana'ah, even if it's only in trying to make it conditional, even only in the planning phase. Alma, what do we see? Kasavar Tanao Batel, that if a husband simply intends to reduce the ksuba from 200 to 100, or for an almana from 100 to 50, not only is that Tanai Batel, but V'isa, she gets the full money. Once he says to his besula wife, you only have 100 zuz, lo samcha daita, she no longer feels comfortable or confident that he's actually going to support her. And then, because of that logic, the concern is that because she no longer feels confident in her husband's commitment to her. Remember the whole rationale for the ksuba. The reason why the chachamim were masakin a ksuba was to protect a woman. She doesn't feel protected now because she's afraid that her husband's trying to divorce her for cheap. So once, Reb Meir says, once we lower that amount of money, once we even try to lower that amount, you cannot be intimate. And that's why we're very makbid that without a ksuba, the couple should not be intimate. You should find your ksuba, rewrite it if you need to with new edim, etc. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. The Reb Meir. We've already learned about Reb Meir on the previous page. What did Reb Meir say on the previous page? To Amar, to know batel, that anyone who tries to make a condition on that which is kasu batorah, the halacha is to know batel. Says the Gemara, but I don't understand. How can you say that Tanai would be batel over here? Reb Meir says that Tanai is batel b'dinei d'oraisa, but b'dirabanan to know kayam. Over here, we're saying by a din derabanan that the Tanai is kam doesn't even make any sense. Says the Gemara, and this is a wild shita, kasava Reb Meir ksuba d'oraisa. We don't pass in this way. But Reb Meir was of the opinion that a ksuba is a chiyuv d'oraisa, mitzvah d'oraisa, whatever the right language is that it's obligatory upon a couple to have a ksuba mi d'oraisa. We know from other shitas from earlier today and from other times in this Masechta that many hold that the ksuba is only a din d'rabanan. We're at the 2 dots halfway down on Nun Vav Amud Beis. Let's continue. Tanya, we had just learned about Reb Meir. Now we're going to see a brisa that is a corollary to our Mishnah in regards to Reb Meir. Tanya, Reb Meir Omer, anyone who reduces the cost of the ksuba for a besula from 200 to anything lower, ule almana mimana, or from a woman who's a be'ula, she's already been married, and you try to reduce her ksuba from 100 to anything less, harezu be'ilasnos, as we already saw. That aligns with our Mishnah. Now our Gemara adds in new shitas. Rabbi Yossi Omer Rishoy. Wow. Rabbi Yossi says it's actually mutter to lower her ksuba. It doesn't matter. No problem at all. Rabbi Yehuda is the third shita. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ratza kosev lebesula star shel masayim. If you want, you can write for the besula a star of masayim, a ksuba of 200. V'hi kosev eslo, and she can write back. He's kabalti mimecham mana. I've already received 100. Really, just writing off 100. She's allowed to lower it. And as well, ula almana mana, v'hiko sebes lo his kabalti mimecha mishim zu. So this brisa quotes 3 shitas: the shita of Rav Meir that you're never allowed to reduce the minimum values of a ksuba, 200 for a besula, 100 for a beula. The shita of Rabbi Yossi that it's perfectly permissible to reduce these prices, and then the shita of Rabbi Yehuda that she is allowed to write it off, but he is not allowed to write it off. Asks the Gemara 2/3 of the way down. This Savar Rabbi Yossi Rishoy. Does Rabbi Yossi really hold that one is allowed to minimize the value of a ksuba? After all, says the Gemara, Urminhi, we have a source in the Tanaim that argues with what we just learned. How can Rabbi Yossi say Rishoy? After all, Ein osin ksubas isha metaltalin mipnei tikun olam. The Tanakama in this brisa writes that we're not allowed to pay a woman through her ksuba from metaltalin, from literally portable products that don't have achrayas, because mibnei tikun olam, because the prices fluctuate so much, it's not fair. She's going to end up getting shafted. It's not fair. Says Rabbi Yossi, seemingly explaining the Tanakama, Amar Rabbi Yossi, v'chima tikun olam yesh bezu. What are our concerns about tikun olam? V'halo ein ktsuvin upochsin. The prices aren't fixed in regards to metaltalin, and we're afraid that the prices are going to get reduced in a way that's unfair. So first, the Gemara just asks a side question. Tanakama nami einosin kamar. It seems like the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi are saying the same thing. The Tanakama said einosin, and Rabbi Yossi says, how could you? Elalav, it must be that the machlokes in this brisa between Rabbi Yossi and between Rabbi Yossi and the Tanakama is as follows. When is it that we have a problem of enos and that we're not allowed to use metaltalin? That's true when the husband doesn't accept achrayas upon these items to pay back. Aval kibel alav achrayas osin. But if the husband says, look, no matter what happens with the market, you're able to collect an equivalent of 200 zuz from the day of the contract. Osin, then we do allow it. And how does Rabbi Yossi argue with the Tanakama? 5 lines, 6 lines from the bottom. V'asar Rabbi Yossi lememar ki kibel alav achrayas amai osin v'halo en ksuvenu pochsin. Even if he accepts upon himself achrayas, I don't understand, says the Gemara. At the end of the day, the market is still the market. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi clearly was more strict than the Tanakama. And now, here is the question of the Gemara based on this. Hashda, now, Uma Hasam, in regards to this case of metaltalin, the Dilma Pachse, where we're not even sure that it's going to happen, it's only a possibility that there will be a reduction in the cost of the market with metaltalin. There, Rabbi Yossi was Chayish Rabbi Yossi. Hacha, in regards to our case of the Ksuba, where a man says, I'm not giving you 200, I'm giving you 100. There, divadai kapachsa, lakol shekain. If in a case of safek, Rabbi Yossi doesn't allow us to reduce the costs for the woman, for sure when it's a vadai, of course he wouldn't let it. So how can Rabbi Yossi say that it's rishoy, that we're allowed to lower the price of her ksuba? The Gemara responds 2 lines from the bottom, you've just compared an apple and an orange, and it doesn't work. Hachi hashta. These 2 things cannot live in the same world. Hasam lo yada desachil. Over there, in regards to the metaltalin, she had no foreknowledge of what the market was going to do. She had no idea the metaltalin would reduce their value, would lower in their value, and therefore, how could she be mechil? How could she be mocheles? It's not even possible. She doesn't know what's going to happen. Masha'en kein hacha over here by our ksuba, where he says out loud, I'd like to pay you less than 200. Here, yodai, now she knows about it, become machla, and she's able to do this on her own. And says the Gemara, a quick story starting on the very bottom line of Nun Vav Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Achte de Rami Bar Chama, the sister of Rami Bar Chama, Havas Nesiva le Rav Avia, was married to Rav Avia. On the top of Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, they had a big halachic issue, Irkas Ksubasa. Rashi, Shtar Ksubasa. She lost her Ksuba. This is one of those times you have to look at Rashi and be like, Shtar Ksubasa? Like, what are you doing? Why is Rashi adding in Shtar Ksubasa? All it says is Irkas Ksubasa. And from the flow of the Gemara, it becomes crystal clear that she lost her Shtar Ksuba. It's I don't know the answer. I'm just raising the question. Strange Rashi. Anyways, the Gemara says they lost their Ksuba. So they went to go ask a Shiloh. We can't be intimate. What are we supposed to do? So says the Gemara, Asur l'kamed de Rav Yosef. They went in front of Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef says, Amar lahu, he says to them, you guys know exactly what this is. Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Zu divrei Rav Meir. This is Rav Meir. What did we say about Rav Meir in the previous page? We said about Rav Meir that a couple is not allowed to be together, that a husband, it's be'ilah znus if they're together, at least conceptually, it's considered be'ilah znus. Why? Because she doesn't feel secure in the marriage, because there's no ksuba. You lost your ksuba. She doesn't feel secure. You can't be together. That's Shitas Rav Meir. Aval, Rav Yosef adds, Chachamim omrim, Masha Adam is ishto shtaim u'shaloshanim below ksuba. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's not bezdin. Remember, we learned in the Mishnah that even if he doesn't even write a ksuba, he still has to pay 200 zuz. So maybe the Chachamim are saying, okay, it's fine. You can be together. Don't get a new ksuba. Amar leha baye. Hold on one second. You can't hold like the Chachamim and say they don't need to get a new ksuba. After all, the Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, halacha ki Rav Meir, big rosa, where Rav Meir took a din de oraisa and was more machmir than the din de oraisa, we always pass him like Rav Meir. So you can't tell me she doesn't need a new ksuba. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, you need a new ksuba. Ihachi says the Gemara, zil kasubla. That's how we paskin in Shulchan Aruch. We paskin in Shulchan Aruch based on this, that if a shtar ksuba is lost, a couple is not allowed to be intimate until it's found. And that's why people should keep them in it doesn't have to be in their house. It just has to be in a place that she has access to, because if God forbid she needs it, then she needs it. And then we want to make sure that she gets paid back, because that's Rav Meir's whole concern. These next 20 lines of Gemara until the Mishnah is a conversation about whether or not this machlokes that we just learned about in this brisa, this 3-way machlokes, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and the Tanakama and Rav Meir, where it applies. So it says the Gemara, there's going to be a couple of different approaches. The Gemara says, 6 lines down on Zayin Amud Aleph, Ki asa Rav Dimi, Amar Rav Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi, Mishum bar kapara, machlokes betchila. The only time there's a machlokes of whether or not a husband is allowed to reduce the salary, the ksuba of his wife, that's only true betchila, in the beginning. We don't yet know what the beginning is. We'll see in the Gemara in a moment. Aval besof, but seemingly everyone agrees. Rav Meir, Rav Yehuda, and Rabbi Yossi, everyone seems to agree. L'divrei hakol eina mocheles. Everyone seems to agree that at that point she's not allowed to be mocheles. She's not allowed to reduce her own ksuba. The Rav Yochanan, seemingly going against Rav Yoshua ben Levi, Rav Yochanan Amar bein bezu uvein bezu. Whether it's tchila or sof, machlokes is the same. Now, Amar Rabbi Abo says as follows: Mifresh shali minei Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said to me the following: De'ana, I, Rav Yochanan, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, which seems to be a machlokes, really lo palgina nahadade. We're actually not arguing with one another about whether or not there's a machlokes at tchila v'sof. Why? Because my betchila took Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. When Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said that there's a machlokas between these three tanaim in regards to the tchila, what was he talking about? Tchilas chuppah, the beginning of the chuppah. Umay sof. What did he mean that by the sof, by the time they had already consummated their marriage, that she could not reduce her ksuba, she could not be mochelas? That was talking about sof bia. And Rabbi Yochanan continues, V'chi ka'amina ana bein bezu uvein bezu machlokes. When I said that the machlokes is really in the beginning and in the end, I was talking about a different tchila and a different sof. What was I talking about? Tchilas chuppah, that was actually the same. The sof chuppah, the end of the chuppah, and what's the end of the chuppah? That's really tehi tchilas bia. We presume that at the end of the chuppah, that timing aligns with the beginning of bia. So therefore, there's really no machlokes between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan. Now, all of that was said in the name of Rav Dimi. But then the Gemara says, 5 lines into the wide lines, Ki asa Ravin, Amar Rav Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. They said in the name of Levi, and they said in the name of Bar Kapara, Mishum Bar Kapara. Really, it's different. It's not, we said the machlokas was in the beginning. It's not true. Machlokas the besof. This whole story is taught about the sof. Really, the machlokas is on a later part of their marriage as to whether or not these tanoim would allow her to be mochelas on her ksuba. Aval betchila divrei hakol mochelas. But everyone agrees that at the beginning of her marriage, she's allowed to accept a reduced rate for her star, for her ksuba. Why not? Totally up to her. The Rav Yochanan Amar, this is all version 2. Rav Yochanan Amar, bein bezu uvein bezu machlokes. Really, he says the machlokes in the tanoim is true both in the seifa, both at the sof and at the tchila. And then says the Gemara similarly, Amar Rabbi Abo, Lididi Mifresh shali minei Rabbi Yochanan. Then Rabbi Abo says in his second version of this story, he says, I heard directly from Rabbi Yochanan, Da'ana Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi lo palgina nahadade. And he says, Rabbi Yochanan says, really, he and I are not arguing at all. My livisof Da'amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. When Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said that there's a machlokas between these tanaim only in the sof, what was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi talking about? Sof chuppah, umay tchila, tchilas chuppah. And amina ana bein bezu machlokes. When Rav Yochanan said that there was a machlokes both tchila and sof, that was talking about tchilas bia v'sof bia, and tchilas bia is sof chuppah, which is the same exact thing that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said. So there's no machlokes between them. And the Gemara concludes with a hashkafic outlook and how to best understand these kinds of machlokos. The Gemara says halfway down the page, Amar of Papa, Ilavd Amar Rabbi Abahu. If Rabbi Abahu had not said, quote, Lididi Mifra Shalim Ined Rabbi Yochanan, the honor of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi lo palgina nahadade. If Rabbi Abahu had not said that I directly heard from Rabbi Yochanan that quote, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua are not arguing, Havamina, I would have definitely thought that Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi pligi, and I would have thought that Rav Dimi v'Ravin lo pligi, that the two people who came from Eretz Yisrael to Babel, that they were not arguing. My sof to Ka'amar Ravin. At the end of the day, what was the sof that Ravin could have said? Sof chuppah. Umay tchila to Ka'amar Rav Dimi tchilas bia. I could have easily understood that Rav Dimi and Ravin were not arguing, and therefore I needed Rabbi Abo to explain to me. My kamashmulan. What, says the Gemara, was Rav Papa trying to teach us with this line? And the Gemara teaches us a general approach to answering questions about machlokas. We have preferential. We have a preference for how to solve machlokos, and says the Gemara as follows: Hakamash malan de pligi tre amorai atayma denafshayu. It's better to establish a machlokas with two amorai stating their own opinions. The lo pligi tre amorai aliba dechad amora. And it would have been better, says Rav Papa. Again, it's not this way because Rabbi Abo heard from Rabbi Yochanan directly. But where we have a choice, it's better to say that, for example, in this case, Rav Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi are arguing than it is to say that Ravin and Rabbi Avin are arguing about their Rebbe. We would rather not have a broken Masorah in regards to one Rebbe. So if I have a double level machlokas like we have here, potentially double level machlokas, I'd rather have Abaye and Rava argue with each other, then say that person X didn't understand their Rebbe properly. We'll stop right here at this Mishnah. Tomorrow night we'll learn a blot and a half as well. Wishing you all a beautiful night.